All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So this is our designated managing broker or / owners meeting, really meant to identify a few things that are broker specific, managing broker specific. And then, of course, I don't know the percentage, but half of this probably is information for the agents as well. But I really want to give you all a chance to have a conversation. I shouldn't say conversation, a chance to ask questions. I don't want a lot of conversation for antitrust reasons. So we are here today to talk about the NAR lawsuit settlement in specific. We also have a couple of other pieces of other things to talk about as well. Yesterday morning, I had about 4 things on my list to talk about. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about, and my page filled up fast. So I'm guessing I'm going to have about 40 minutes, 45 minutes worth of material for you, and then answer questions. I'm planning to hold off on answering questions at this point until the end, and then I'll have 15 or 20 minutes to do so within the hour. And I'm available to stick around after 11 o'clock if anyone else still has questions. And of course, as most of you know, I've been out making the rounds. I've done, I don't even know, 35 or 40 office meetings. I've been to most of your offices, I guess. Spoke with a lot of you about the changes upcoming. And that's really the best way for us to have a conversation, for you to ask questions where we can answer some of your specific questions about how your company plans on going forward. Of course, Heartland is not here to tell you how to do your business. We never have been. We don't do business practices. We're not here to talk about how much you charge. We're not here to tell you how much to charge or who to charge or where to charge or whatever, but rather maybe pull some of the mud out of this muddy water that's in front of us to be able to see through it, to see, is there a shark on the other side of this muddy water, or is this a goldfish? We don't know yet. So here to answer some questions to help you through some of these things. But of course, antitrust is a huge concern for us, and we're going to stay clear of that. If any of you, while we're doing this call, have concerns about antitrust, things being said or whatever, please make note. Let us know so that we can not get into that troublesome situation. So that's my antitrust statement as best as I can think of it. With that, I'm just going to dive right into some things. So law changes. Let me tell you one thing. This is a little bit different from outside of the lawsuit, which is whatever is on everyone's mind. But so the governor did sign the bill that was on his desk for the license law changes that were requested by Illinois Realtors and IDFPR. And so there are a number of changes coming from that. Illinois Realtors has put out information on that. I pulled some information from their site, but I want to make sure you get some of that. So let me read you this one fairly short piece. The Illinois Department of Financial Professionalization has clarified that the requirements for real estate licensees will not change until the new rules are approved. The earliest possible date for the rules to be filed is January 1st, 2025, when the act goes into effect, followed by a 90-day comment period. Based on this timeline, IDFPR is targeting a change effective date of July 1st, 2025. So some of the changes that are implemented by the license law change, I'm going to touch on a couple of them here. One, won't likely take effect until July 1st. We don't know that that's the date. That's likely. We know they won't take effect before January 1st, but here's one of them. So no changes were made to the continuing education requirements for the 2025 managing broker renewal. So there is, IDFPR is aiming for a new 6-hour core curriculum, including 2 hours of fair housing training to go into effect on July 1st, 2025. So in case you weren't aware, the CE requirements within the license law are changing for agents in Illinois to require 2 hours of fair housing training every renewal period. Similarly, but separately, National Association of Realtors is requiring 1 hour of fair housing training every 3 years. So as long as you are in compliance with the 2 hours every 2 years of Illinois license law, you don't need to worry about NARs because you'll automatically be meeting that because this is, they do crossover. You do get credit for both when you do the one. So again, he said, IDFPR is aiming for the new 6-hour core curriculum course, which will include the 2 hours of fair housing training to go into effect on July 1st of 2025. All courses will expire on June 30th, will be revised prior to that date. So this will not affect the current managing broker renewal that's in place right now who are renewing April 30th of 2025. You don't need to worry about the 2 hours of fair housing training for the upcoming renewal. Everybody good? Got that? A thumbs up, anybody? All right, makes sense? Good. All right, that was the first one. I'm leaving the rest of the license law stuff for IR to push out. I just want to make sure you all knew because I've got a couple of questions about the fair housing training. All right. Part of antitrust as well, compensation models. Heartland is not here to tell you how to charge, who to charge, or whatever. You can charge fees based on your own business models within your firm. You should never be discussing with other firms how much to charge, who to charge, all of those things. You can charge an hourly wage if you want. You could charge a dollar amount if you want. You could charge a percentage if you want. You could go to an a la carte menu and say, hey, if I show you home it's $50, I write an offer, it's $100. I go to the home inspection, it's $25. You could do that. I don't see that being popular, but you could do that. So Heartland is not here to tell you how to charge or what to charge. So what has changed with these effects that take place tomorrow? We're almost there, folks. Hopefully you're ready. Hopefully your agents are ready. What I think has changed, the way I can see this and explain this, is that sellers are used to offer compensation to a buyer's agent for selling the home. That compensation should not ever have been used as a rationale for showing a home or not, and I believe the vast majority of agents did not use it for that purpose, but that was a contested point in the lawsuit. What has changed, so we're no longer necessarily offering the compensation, but rather more likely buyers through our Form 352, the seller agreement to pay buyer broker compensation, will likely be asking buyers will likely be asking through their offer to have the seller pay the buyer's broker compensation. So it's a shift in the model. In some respects, the money's still all there one way or another. I'm not saying the dollar amounts, but the money's still all there. It's just a matter of which way it's approached. Instead of the seller offering it, the buyer is going to be asking for it, is what we see the future being. I don't know that that's the case. Again, the water is very murky. We can't tell what's on the other side, a shark or a guppy or a goldfish or whatever, but we'll see where this all goes. And as the water is clear, as we get more answers to questions, and there are still a lot of questions that don't have answers. I had a call an hour ago and more questions came up and I said, at this point, we don't have an answer for you. This is a way you might use to go through that situation, but I can't tell you that's the way to go through that situation. All right. I do think in the very near future, lenders will become accustomed and be allowed to finance the buyer's brokerage compensation. And when that's more thoroughly allowed, I think a lot of this confusion will go away because I think a buyer will be paying a buyer's agent directly, meaning on the master settlement statement that it'll be listed seller side paid by seller and buyer side paid by buyer, but that's not where we are today necessarily. That is an option, but that isn't a guarantee. So we're going to come back to a little bit of that in a minute. MRED, and I hope I'm telling you stuff you already know in this part of the conversation. MRED is removing the offer of compensation from the MLS. As of tomorrow and going forward, you will no longer see the offer of compensation listed. So questions I'm getting on this. Okay, Jim, so great. What about deals that are in the process now? Can we rely on the offer of compensation? The answer I've been told, and I'm not an attorney, I can't give legal advice, is that yes, you can. That was a unilateral offer of compensation. You've met the requirement to receive that. You've contractually met that obligation by bringing the ready, willing, able buyer, and through a negotiated and executed contract that moves forward, you can enforce the offer of compensation that was and is today, not tomorrow, is today offered through the MLS. What I said to someone was, if I were a broker, I would be taking a screenshot of my listings with the offer of compensation and my sales, the buy side of offers of compensation, and keeping those in the files for everything that's in the process right now, just to be sure I had a record of what that compensation is. And from the listing side, in case the buy side says, no, you offered me a different amount, you've got proof, here it is. Now, MRED can pull this information up if necessary, but I don't think you really want to go that route and have to get MRED involved to do that. So I would take pictures of them all. Just what I would do. Never do I tell you what to do. Another piece of information that's being affected by this removal of the compensation fields is that the variable rate commission the SCI field, special compensation information field, where V and X would be seen if there was an appropriate V, a variable rate, or X for exclusions would be listed, is being removed. So there isn't a mechanism for you all as brokers to communicate that there's a variable rate commission being offered or an exclusion being offered, an exclusion for that listing. An exclusion, in case you don't know, is, hey, I've got a piece of property for sale. The neighbor said he wants to buy it, so we're going to exclude the neighbor from this listing. If the neighbor buys it, you don't get paid, but anybody else, you get paid. That would be an exclusion, and if that happens, you need to make sure that you explain to a buyer who's showing the property the name of the person who's excluded, so that if that is their client, they know that they will likely not get paid or what the situation is. So I'm not sure yet how those work, other than if you are a listing agent with those categories, either variable or exclusion, and you have an offer being presented to you, you have an affirmative obligation, meaning you must be proactive and tell the buyer's agent or buyer that there are either exclusions or variable rate and what that means and if they're in play. So you have an obligation to bring that forth without being asked about it, if those are in place. Concession field will remain, but only for true concessions. So concession fields will remain in the MLS. It is for things like we need a new roof, we need a new deck, we need new windows, we need new flooring. It can include closing costs and seller credits. Closing cost credits is the word I'm looking for. Closing cost credits. It can include that. However, it cannot include compensation. So let me be really clear. The rule is really clear. And if we just stick to this really basic rule, we can answer most questions. If what you're proposing to do is helping to facilitate compensation being facilitated through the MLS, then it's not allowed. So keep that in mind as your large overriding filter. I had someone very creatively ask me, so what if we ended the sales price of all of our homes with 25, meaning 2.5%, or 30, meaning 3%, or 40, meaning 4%. I said to them, so is the sales price trying to facilitate the offer of compensation amount? And she's like, well, I suppose. Well, then you can't do it. I had someone else say, we're going to take a picture of a clock and it's going to say it's 2:30, meaning 2.5% is being offered, or 3 o'clock, meaning 3 is right, or 4 o'clock, 4. And I said, so are you trying to take a picture of this clock and put in the MLS so that you can facilitate compensation? I'm like, well, I suppose. Well, then you can't do it. So there's very creative ideas going on out there. You can't do those things. And I go back to, it kind of doesn't matter what the seller thinks they're going to be paying. What matters is what the buyer, through the buyer's agent in the offer, through the offer, what the buyer's offer might be asking the seller to pay is really the larger piece of it now. I think on the listing side, listing agents and brokers should be preparing their clients for, it's very likely when we get an offer that the offer might include a request for compensation to pay a buyer's agent. And here are the reasons why that might be a good thing for you, and explain to them why they would want to pay that. So let's be prepared for that situation, and then have a dollar amount that might fit into that situation on your seller net sheet. But the problem becomes, on your listing agreement, you have an obligation in Illinois law to put down the full amount of commission and the co-op amount of compensation that's going to be paid. And yet you really don't know what the co-op amount is going to be until you get done negotiating. So I would suggest the law in Illinois has not yet caught up to the settlement, and there will be some tweaks to all these things as we move through. But just know there are still a lot of nuances for how this is all going to be put into play. So concession field is where I was at. Make sure you're using concession field for true concessions and not any way to facilitate offering compensation. Okay. Buyer agency agreements. Buyer agency agreements must be signed prior to touring any property. Let me say it again, because this is where I think you may have a really large obstacle, perhaps, is from the public's perception of what your agents are looking to do when they go to a property. Think of this scenario. You've got an agent who gets a call, someone wants to see a property, your agent shows up at the property to show them the home, and now they're going to push a form in front of the client and say, I need you to sign off saying that you're going to pay me this large amount of money. Large can be $2, it can be $200, it can be $2,000, it can be $20,000, whatever large means. This large amount of money to me for selling you a home. And if you are pushing that in front of someone's face and the first time you meet them before you even show a home, that could be scary. That could be intimidating. And yet that's exactly what the lawsuit says. Before you tour a home, which is the word they use, which is showing for us, you need to have an agency agreement signed. And arguably, you're going to need to have on there the dollar amount that you're looking to get paid. So the conversation may include wording like, hey, while we're here to show you this home today, and there's no fee for me to show you this home, please understand that my fees for selling you a home are this. And you write down on the buyer agency agreement what that is. So as we move forward through the process, whether you buy this home or another home, my firm is looking to get paid because after all, I'm not free and there's fees and costs involved and we have to get paid. So this is what our firm's fees are. And before we can even show your property now, because of the NAR settlement, we do have a document we need to have you sign. So if you go ahead and get this signed, we can go ahead and show you the home and we can work this all out. But please know one thing, with the compensation that we've got listed here, there might be multiple ways to have this paid. One of them could be, with your permission, we could use a form to add to your contract to ask the seller to pay my fees as a part of the contract. So it comes out on their side. But let's be clear, you're the one bringing all the money to closing anyway. So really you're financing the whole thing, but the seller would have it on their side of the transaction and they would agree to it. And that would be a part of the contract when we write it. So that's one method. Another method is you could pay me on your side of the contract. So at closing, you bring money and it covers all the fees. Or there could be a settlement where they pay a portion and you pay a portion. So there are lots of ways this can go forward. We really don't need to get into the weeds about that at this point. Let's get inside, take a look at the home, but I do, of course, need to have you sign off on this form before I can even show you a property. It might be a conversation like that. I don't say it well. I haven't talked to a client in 25 years, so you guys probably have a better way to do that than I do, but that's the gist of what the conversation might sound like. So again, he said, buyer's agent's agreements must be signed prior to touring any property is what the lawsuit requires. All right. And then also side note is, and we're looking up exactly where this is because I was contested on this morning, but you cannot take more money from the transaction than what your buyer agency agreement says. So I like to use nuts. So let's just suggest that a cashew is worth more, has a higher value than a peanut. If you have a cashew amount written down on your buyer's agency agreement and the seller agrees to pay you peanuts, that's fine. That's great. Now you need to decide as a brokerage, or if you've given this to your agents, the authority to negotiate that, will you accept the peanuts as your full commission, or are you going to require, ask, desire to have the buyer pay the difference between the cashew and the peanut? And that would go on the buyer's side of the transaction. Understanding some lenders may not be able to finance that, and it might be direct out of pocket, if you will, as part of the proceeds and additional proceeds the buyer might need to bring to closing. We're working with lenders to try to figure this all out, and hopefully we will get through all of that, and lenders will be able to finance. I do know several lenders do not have an issue with that. And the two lenders I've talked to said they do want to see a copy of the buyer's agency agreement, though, that spells out the total commission or the amount. So the opposite side is, what if you write down you'll take peanuts and somehow the seller says, no, I think I want to pay the buyer's agent a cashew. You can't take more than the peanuts. You can't. So we're looking up exactly where in the FAQs that is, but that has been said by Katie Johnson a number of times, including on Wednesday's call where I was at with her. So, and you can't modify your buyer's agency agreement upward to accept more because now you're being offered more. You can amend it downward to be in alignment with the contract if you're willing to take what the seller is offering and give up what you had written down, but you can't increase it. Okay, next up, Heartland forms. So as you can imagine, you already know, we have probably, I don't even know, 60 forms online. We've gone through them all. Our forms committee about 3 weeks ago spent 3.5 hours. They looked at 16 forms. We identified we could get rid of one form, yay. However, we need to modify 15, those other 15 forms in one way or another. A major component of the tweaks that were made was changing the word commission to compensation throughout all of those documents. Now, we're hoping we caught it everywhere, but I'm betting we didn't. So when we catch more of them, we will change them, and we won't even notify you of that because that's such a minor tweak, but we will make those changes as they're caught. I do expect, unfortunately, that we will find more things we need to change as we move forward. Like, for instance, Ivor Johnson, our chairperson of forms and contracts, and Kim here on staff and myself caught this week 3 more forms we need to update. So we didn't have time for the contract and forms committee to come together. Ivor, Kim, and I sat down yesterday and went through them, and we're making the tweaks to those forms to make sure they are compliant with what's required. So there's 3 more. So of the 16, now there's 19, and I think there's a couple more coming. We are tweaking our forms, we're making the changes, but we have up on our website all of the change forms that are compliant currently. We are still tweaking some language here and there, but the tweaks are not non-compliant. So while we're making them better, they're not bad. So on our webpage, heartlandro.com, when you click on the members only and then click on the form section, and yes, you need to sign in twice because of the firewalls and all the technology. When you get to the form section, we have identified all of the ones that have been changed recently by putting in red, revised, and I think it's 08-2024, it might be 07-2024. And there's 15 and there will be 19. We've got 3 more going up today that will be tweaked further. So they're all online. I apologize that we don't have them syndicated yet to MRED, Glide, Dotloop, Zip Forms, DocuSign, Sky is Slope, and 6 others I can't think of. They're not there yet. We don't have the fillable forms yet. This has been a massive undertaking to look at 60 of our forms to identify the 20 that need to be tweaked. We've got them changed and uploaded to our website so that you can download them. Unfortunately, right now they're PDFs. So if you want to take our PDFs, put them into Dotloop or whatever and make them fillable, great, have at it, love it, go for it. We are still working on making our forms fillable. I was asked this morning, when are they going to be available? And I said, I'm hoping for Friday, meaning I'm really hoping we'll have them ready by Thursday of next week. But Friday is my target date for it. We want the fillables done and uploaded for you all to go forward with. I want to talk about 4 forms, really 5, really 6 different forms, 4 specifically. So first, the listing agreement. The listing agreement has the main change. So I mentioned the word commission to compensation, and that's a lot in a lot of forms. But that's minor. That wasn't even a requirement. We just thought that was a better wording. What has been required, and we're going to talk about the transition form later, but the transition form has a line on there that says all commissions are negotiable and are not set by law. And that's a wording we're putting into all of our into all of our agency agreements. So at least 6 of our forms are agency agreements. I think there might be 8 of them actually, are getting this line added. And that was yesterday's catch, that 3 of our forms didn't have that. So we're updating it. There were 3, I'm gonna say, lesser used forms, but regardless, we're making those updates. The listing agreement has it added in. Form 353, 354, and 355, which are our 3 primary buyer agency agreement forms. And again, 353, 354, 355. 353 is property specific. 354 is non-exclusive, and 355 is the exclusive representation agreement. So those are our primary 3 forms for buyer agency. And then also we do have a tenant agency agreements, which is form 008, which is one we caught this week that we didn't catch earlier. So we're updating that. Slightly lesser used, but still very important. So we will have that up on our site this week, probably, she said this morning, so they're probably already up already. We're working on it, folks. I apologize that they're not all there, but you can only imagine how much work this is. And it's not as simple as going into our Word document and making some tweaks, because we have line numbers on there, and Word doesn't work well with line numbers. So every time you make a tweak and it pushes to a next line, it throws the entire document off, which is a nightmare. But anyway, we're working on it. So forms updates, that's where I'm going to come back to those 4 forms in a minute, in a second. So challenge, listing agents might desire to explain the value that a buyer's agent brings to the transaction. I think it's really incumbent upon a listing agent to talk about the value of a buyer's agent and why it's good for the seller that the buyer have an agent on their side. And frankly, you may, and this is for you to think about, I'm not telling you to do what to do, but you might want to recognize or think about the value, the importance of, the potential of your listing agent talking to the seller about why they might want to pay a buyer's agent's fee. Maybe they don't. I think you might have some sellers that say, I'm not paying it regardless. And there's going to be a consequence to that, especially for first-time home buyers who can't come up with the money for a down payment and paying their agent out of pocket. And you might be reducing the amount of buyers available for first-time homes, as an example. So there might be a benefit to the seller to take that transaction, those expenses, and put it on their side. And I would just remind clients of one main point. The seller's not really financing this whole thing. The buyer is financing the whole deal. The buyer is the only one coming to the table with money. And what the seller really probably cares most about is what they walk away with. So I would talk to sellers, and I don't sell property, of course, anymore, but I would talk to sellers about the value of, let's not focus on how much the commissions are, who pays the commissions, how much, who pays commissions, where the money comes from. Let's focus on the bottom line of what you're going to walk away with, because I'm guessing 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now, you don't care who you paid. You care how much you walk away with. And I'm going to focus on how much you make. We call that the seller's net, and I'm going to do a seller's net sheet for you. So let's just say focused on that. In fact, I'm going to be hyper-focused on that for you, and let's not get hung up today or later on how much they're asking for. Let's worry about how much you're going to walk away with. That's what I would say. I'm not telling you what to say. But I think it's important for a buyer, for a listing side, to explain that there is a value, if you believe it, for a buyer to have a buyer's agent. And then again, why it might make sense to be on the seller side. Buyer's agents might need help. Listing agents understand this. So I think that's going to be incumbent again on the listing agent to really do their work in preparing a seller for, while we put down this number on the listing sheet as a full amount of compensation and a co-op compensation, the co-op compensation is negotiable. Our fees on the listing side are not negotiable at this point. This is what my fees are. This is what our firm has told us our fees need to be, and that's what we will expect from you through the transaction to get paid. On the buyer side, when an offer comes in, we can look at that and see if there's wiggle room in there to make some changes. What I would do is, if I were in a listing, I would put in a number in that co-op compensation to be able to show a seller what they might walk away with if you have an idea what's expected. So no longer are you directly offering compensation. Really, you're probably going to be asking for compensation. So along that lines, I've heard agents say that they're going to, buyer's agents say, well, how do I know how much the compensation is being offered? And my comment is, you don't in a lot of ways. And I don't know you need to know in a lot of ways. Because it's really a matter of what is your agreement with your buyer about compensation, and what is your buyer's expectation of how to pay that? Do they want to pay you that directly on the closing statement? Do they want to have you ask for that from the seller? Do they want to pay a portion of that and you pay a portion and the seller pay a portion? So there are mechanisms and ways for this to get worked out. And I think it needs to be carefully looked at because law hasn't caught up with yet the settlement. So Illinois, you need to put down the full amount of commission and the co-op compensation, and yet you really don't know what the co-op is until you have that offer. So a little bit of catch-22 in this. All right, separately, buyer brokerage commission statement. So for you all, as buyer's agent brokerages, buyer brokerages, I would suggest to you, and I've told the title companies this, I've told attorneys this on the Bar Association call I had with them 2 months ago. I think it's really important for a buyer's brokerage firm to send over to title a buyer's broker commission statement. You're used to doing this on the listing side. You now need to do it on the buyer side. And here's the main reason why. What if you have a buyer's agency agreement signed for the cashew? The seller offers you peanuts. Your buyer says, great, we'll accept the peanuts. You say, but you still owe me the difference, Mr. Buyer, and we need the difference to be paid for, and that's going to be on the commission statement, on the closing statement. There's only one way the title company is going to know this, because the listing side won't know. The listing side has no right to your compensation agreement. They shouldn't be asking for it. They shouldn't be saying, well, in order for us to pay you a part of that compensation, we need to see the agreement. No, you have no right to that form. That's an agreement between the buyer and the buyer's agency or buyer's brokerage firm. So listing sites should not be asking for that. Some lenders are going to ask for that if they're going to finance that. And that's where I understand it. And it makes sense that in that case, they want to see if there's a contractual obligation to pay that. So back to my point, if a buyer has agreed to pay a cashew, the seller is offered peanuts, and there's a difference, the only way the title company is going to know this is if you send over a buyer brokerage commission statement to the title company saying, hey, our total commission is this number, it's a cashew, and of that cashew, the selling side is paying the peanuts, and the buyer is paying direct this remainder. The listing side won't know that information to put it on the commission statement. So I would suggest to you just get in the habit of every deal you have, you send it over. And I see on the call here, someone I met with yesterday morning, I won't call out the person's name, but I had this conversation and this person said, we had that exact situation. I've already been sending over buyer brokerage statements and the buyer brokerage commission was different. The statement she sent over was different than the one the title company, the listing site sent over. And the title company called her up and said, hey, I'm seeing two different things here. What's factual? And had to get clarified. That's exactly what we want to happen. When there's a question about compensation, it gets clarified in advance of the closing, not at the closing table. We good there? Thumbs up? Okay. Moving on. I covered that one already. Transition forms. So transition forms, IR has put out the transition forms. There are two forms. They're very simple. I'm not going to put it on the screen necessarily, but if you can see my page here in half a second. It's really simple. Here it is. You see that form? That's it. It's that small. And the important line is one sentence is the important line. So IR has put this out. It doesn't have a form number, which drives me nuts. There are two of them. There's a buyer disclosure. So it's called compensation disclosure statement to buyer and compensation disclosure statement to seller. And I will read it since it's so short. And I'll just read the buyer one. This compensation disclosure statement dated blank line is in reference to your blank insert applicable brokerage agreement entered into upon date of brokerage agreement. As a result of the National Association of Realtors proposed settlement agreement and related practice changes, the following disclosure is required in all brokerage agreements. Notice to buyer. A buyer's agent's compensation is fully negotiable and is not set by law. The seller form says the exact same thing, obviously seller instead of buyer, and its last line is notice to seller. A seller's agent's compensation is fully negotiable and is not set by law. So here's what Betsy says. You guys know Betsy. She's the chief legal counsel for Illinois Realtors. Let me flip back. I'm going to read to you what she wrote me, and then I want to talk just briefly about it. If I can find my paper. I put it in their sheet. So Betsy wrote that, yeah, I put them in the packet from this morning. Oh, there it is over here. Sorry. She wrote, transition period. If you are, and I'll read this twice if I need to, it's not that long. If you are not using the new forms right now, and let me stop and say, you weren't because they weren't available until about 3 days ago. So you weren't. If you're not using the new forms right now and the listing clients or buyers are not under contract, then you should add this disclosure to their forms by amendment. We believe adding this disclosure will suffice. So if you send them this form, the buyer form, the seller form, to folks who are not under contract, she believes this will suffice and meet the requirements of the settlement. Second part. If an existing listing or buyer brokerage agreement refers to offers of compensation on or through the MLS or somehow relates to the MLS, then those need to be replaced with compliant brokerage forms. Signatures of the parties will definitely be needed. So she is saying all of the forms that you have, and I will tell you Heartland's had this information and Main Street's had this information. I don't know about everybody else's, but I know those two. Meet the second part where it says these forms need to be replaced with compliant brokerage agreements. Signatures of the parties will definitely be needed. Okay, let me caveat this. I am not an attorney. Did you hear me? I am not an attorney. I cannot give you legal advice. This is not legal advice. I'm just thinking, what do I do as a broker? I'm not a brokerage. Hypothetically thinking, if I'm a brokerage, what do I do? I think you all need to think about what liability lies with you and your firm, with what level of compliancy you elect to go with for this period. This is a short window of time, in my opinion. You have clients now, you have prospects now that you've worked with, that you've got agreements with. How are you going to transition them from the old, out of date, out of compliance forms to tomorrow's in compliance forms? You need to figure out what that looks like and what you're going to do. And I would suggest, if I were a large brokerage firm, I would dot my I's, cross my T's. I would make sure it was perfectly in line with the letter and spirit of the law, because I think there's still a huge spotlight, especially on large brokerage firms. Now, if I'm Jim Heisler, Basement Real Estate, and again, I don't sell real estate, but if I'm a small brokerage firm, I might take a different view and say, I don't think the spotlight is directly on me so much as it is the large guys. Is there a softer approach that meets the requirement of putting our clients and our prospects on notice of this change? And what does that look like? And because we have competitors in the room here, I'm stopping that conversation here. When I've been in offices, they've asked me, well, what if I do that? What if I do this? And of course, I say, I'm not an attorney, I can't give legal advice, but I tell them what I might do. And again, not suggesting what you do. So let's be really careful there. We're not going to go further, but think about the liability for you in moving forward. If any of you have questions and you'd like to bounce an idea off of me afterwards, I am available for phone calls on Monday and afterwards. Today I'm booked solid with appointments. I had 5 office visits on Wednesday alone. I had 3 yesterday, so busy, but that's good. That means you guys know stuff is changing. All right, wrapping up here, a couple last things. So calling the listing office. I hear this from agents who say, well, am I going to need to call the listing office now to find out what the compensation is? How do I know the compensation? And my comment was this, and I said this back in May in Washington, D.C. to a couple of people I know from Alabama. And he said, well, now I have to call a listing agent and find out the listing, what the offered compensation is. And I said, well, why would you need to do that? And he's like, well, I need to know I'm going to get paid, and looked at me like I'm an idiot. And I said, well, do you call to find out what the closing date is? And he's like, no, like I'm an idiot. And I said, do you call to find out what financing? No. Do you call to find out what earnest money they want? No. I said, this is another term of the contract now. This is a way to bring this forward is using Form 352. Again, that is the seller's agreement to pay buyer broker compensation with your client's permission. Let me be deadly clear on that. You have to have your buyer give you permission to use this as an addendum to ask the seller to cover your compensation. Without their permission or acknowledgement, then they are on the hook to pay you directly without it coming through the seller side. So be cautious of how that works. If the seller's offering compensation and you've got a buyer agency agreement, of course, you can't take more than what you've got in your agreement. So if they're offering you a piece of that, then this client owes you difference. There's a lot of nuances here. But I go back to, I don't think, okay, maybe I don't want to generalize too much, but I think you often had times getting a hold of listing agents with regular questions. Imagine how difficult it might be getting a hold of a listing agent when there's 40 people calling them to find out, are you offering compensation? How much is it? Are you offering compensation? How much is it? And leaving all these voicemails. I don't think that's as important to know upfront of what's the offer of compensation. You can't use that anyway as a means to show the property or not. So go show the property and find out if your client's interested. With your client's permission, he said again, you could use Form 352 to ask the seller to pay it. The seller may already have had that conversation with their agent, and I would say hopefully they have, about what compensation might be and what they're willing to pay. But it's all about the offer. If you offer enough money, I would suggest the seller's willing to pay more. If you offer a lower money, maybe the seller's not as willing, or vice versa. You never know the situation of the seller. Sometimes the bottom line isn't as important as a closing date, as an example. So all of the terms go into a contract and they all get weighed out appropriately by the seller's level of importance. Workarounds, and then we're done. And I'll go to questions. So look at that, I'm almost on time. So workarounds. I've heard some rumblings, some rumors that there's some ways that people are thinking they're going to put forth these offers of compensation, building their own websites or whatever. I don't even know exactly what it is. My first word to you is be very, very careful with that. I didn't say don't do it. I did say be very, very careful with that. I think that brings the spotlight back onto those parties that are getting together to do that. And while that may not be illegal, it's certainly going to bring an eye of concern and notice and watch of the parties, DOJ and others, who might suspect collusion or others. I didn't say don't do it. I just said be very careful. So what else? So what I heard on Wednesday, which was sort of new to me, I'd heard a piece of this before, but it was sort of, it's still unclear, but Katie Johnson said that if you desired, you could put a link in the MLS with a link to your website, so long as the website, that link doesn't take you to a page that shows compensation, but your website could elsewhere have compensation listed. You know, I'm just going to say, be really careful with that. Even though Katie said there's a mechanism for that to happen, the lawsuit settlement is really clear that if a website has compensation listed on it, it cannot have a link, a feed from the MLS. So be really careful about how you propose to go forward. And I go back to, I think if I'm a buyer's agent, I'm not going to worry ahead of time about, I'm going to check this in a second here, Jacqueline. I'm not going to worry as much about what the offer of compensation the seller thinks they're offering. It's much like their purchase price. They're going to list their home for sale, but that's sort of a starting point for conversation. And in a sense, he says carefully, so is the offer of compensation you discuss with your seller. It's a good place to start the conversation, but it may not be the final piece that's negotiated in the end, just like neither is the sales price of the home. It could be up or down from there. All right, are links now allowed in the MLS remarks? I thought that was against the MRED rules. So Katie Johnson was talking on a national level. So MRED and others, Metro and others can certainly have their own rules. MRED is watching for links and how those work. And I would tell you to be very careful if you plan on going this route. So I agree with you, Jackie, that I would not be putting links in there. Right now, MRED's plan is a moderate fine structure so that when they find violation of compensation, they're going to take appropriate actions, including copying the agent, letting them know that there's a violation, and the managing broker knowing there's a violation. But other associations, other MLSs are taking much more heavy-handed approach. Like in the Northwest Illinois Alliance of Realtors, I understand in the Rockford area that if there's a violation, they shut off the office instantly. I get it. I can see why they do that. This is a big deal. They don't want to have a spotlight on them for potential violations. So MRED will probably be modifying or reviewing certainly their rules and policies as the water clears, Jackie. But at this point, I would suggest you are correct that putting the link in is causing for trouble. I'd have to double check whether it's truly against an MRED rule violation or not. All right, Dominic, will the buyer broker compensation request be incorporated into purchase contract or is Form 350 only vehicle for this? So great, thank you, Dominic. The answer to that question is 352 is an addendum to the contract. So it would be incorporated into the purchase contract. It is not just a vehicle. However, last point here, 7.0 is the contract we're using today. 8.0 is in the works. They started meeting on May 27th. They had a meeting in June. They had a meeting in July. They had a meeting in August. They're moving forward with the 8.0. 8.0 will, I'd say, I'd almost guarantee it. There are no guarantees in life, but I darn near guarantee 8.0 will include a clause that will take out this separate rider for seller agreement to pay buyer broker compensation. Will be a clause in 8.0. But please know, 8.0, when they met in May, they had 103 proposed changes to review. That's a lot, folks. They've done that. They're boiling it down. Typically, it takes about 14 months for the new contract to come around from 6.0. Well, 6 went to 6.1, but to get to 7.0 was about 14 months, and all those take about 14 months. This won't take 14 months. They are expediting the process, thanks to Kate and the team at Main Street for helping facilitate that. We are guessing, and this is a huge guess, year end is a more likely time frame for 8.0 to come around. I don't know if that means December or January or maybe November, but I don't see November. I think December at the earliest, maybe January for 8.0. And there will be revisions in there, and we will do all the right things to get you trained on that. But for now, Dominic, 7.0 is the contract, and you would use Form 352, which again, seller agreement to pay buyer broker compensation. All right, Billy, if we have an IDX, may we have a separate page on our company website with one line? Okay, if we have an IDX and a separate page on our company website with one line offering compensation property address, this being separate from the IDX. My understanding, so again, I'm going to say I'm not an attorney, I can't tell you factually, but yes is my understanding. You could have a separate website that includes compensation that has no link to the MLS. That is my understanding. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording, by the way, and we are finished with the prepared remarks section.